Hello, everyone. We're here today with someone we've spoken with before, backed by popular demand, Dr. Gordon Donaldson. And Dr. Donaldson is a functional medicine doctor who practices out in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. We're going to talk today about some things that are going on in the healthcare arena, and we could be here for hours talking. As a matter of fact, we've done that before when he and I have met and spoken over breakfast, probably 3 hours for a half an hour meeting, right? But Dr. Donaldson, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Doug, it is a pleasure, and I am looking forward to this conversation because it is a topic that's at the forefront and one that I believe is very important.
Absolutely. And it's in the news right now. RFK Jr. has made a number of changes in a short period of time. Many of those are things that you and I have both discussed in the past and felt strongly about. The most recent is what he's done with the recommended vaccines through the CDC. And so I'm going to let you just kind of freewheel on the ones that have been taken off that recommendation list and your thoughts about that, and we'll discuss that a little bit further.
Well, just in general, I'm trying to think exactly. I know it's the DTaP. I know it's the MMR, the IPV, the Hep B, and Hep A. I think those are the ones. I don't have those exactly, but I'm pretty sure those are the ones. But the key is recommendation. And that is what is so important that people need to understand. The CDC has only ever made it recommendations. They've always been that way. The problem comes in is when schools, states, healthcare agencies, they see recommendation as a mandate and an absolute requirement. So they switched the terminology from recommendation to requirement. It has never been a requirement in any way. And so that's where the real issue comes in. And it's all about autonomy, you know, and we will get into this a little bit. And as you say, we can go for hours, and that is the importance and the logic behind these recommendations even. There isn't a logic behind it. There isn't a logic behind giving a kid the first day a Hep B vaccine. There isn't a logic of giving a 2, 4, 6-month-old the DTaP. Mm-hmm. And so we have to look at that, and that's where it really comes in. And we, like I say, we can get into a whole lot. Well, that's really the key.
Absolutely. And this is where the confusion comes in, because school districts do conflate those two R words, you know, recommendation and requirement. And everyone, and both you and I over the years have helped patients who wanted to go to public school, but not go through all of that. Now, that's become much more difficult over the last several years. But now with this, having some of those vaccinations, those inoculations, taken off of the recommended list should impact the requirement list, I would think. Now, I hope that the schools will follow through with that, but that's a whole nother story. The thing that is so difficult for some to understand, I think, is the individualization of vaccinations. In other words, you know, I think both you and I are agreeing that these aren't necessarily something that should be totally discarded, but by the same token, they can't be just used as a blanket requirement for everyone. We have to consider, in my belief, and from the research I've done over the years, you know, we have genetic variations also with individuals that allow or don't allow them to process things the way they should be. So, you know, I think, you know, you can probably expound on that for an hour for me, but, you know, give me your thoughts relative to those who criticize the fact that you're anti-vaxxer or you want to just totally throw this all out, we can get into the whole mRNA thing, but we'll leave that off the table for right now.
Yeah, so basically with that, again, it goes back to autonomy, it goes back to individuality, it goes back to children being different. If vaccines cause autism, if they caused autism, the rates would be even higher. So there are other variables that come in, and it would be, if that were true, it'd be like a treatment. So it'd be like 90% of the kids would get autism. They don't. All the kids don't develop autoimmune issues over vaccines. All the kids don't develop the issues with heart and things like that. Mm-hmm. But what we have to look at is we have to look at incidence, and we have to look at how it has skyrocketed since the vaccine schedule has been increased, since it has been a quote unquote requirement, and since the pharmaceutical industrial complex has been protected against the lawsuits for injury and death that comes out of vaccines. That says a lot, and that's another whole area we could get into. And we have to look and understand as to why vaccines, quote unquote, have been put in place. And I really, and if we have time, is to take a step back and look at what really is the benefit. Have the vaccines been the major benefactor and driver in reducing these illnesses, or are there other factors? And I would contend there are other factors that actually have driven down the death and incidence of these illnesses, and it was not very clear. There were two very good books published just this year or last year on that. John Leake and Peter McCullough on the book Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, and then Dr. Shaz Khan's book, The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline. Two highly recommended books if you really want to understand the vaccine picture going back to smallpox and when it was first developed.
Absolutely. And, that's a really important point that you bring up is what other factors, there are always multiple variables in any equation, and what other factors impacted the overall health and wellness of people going back generationally. So if we look back, we have things like refrigeration, number one. Okay, we have just overall hygiene and cleanliness. We have sanitation that occurred, water treatment, all kinds of things that impacted the transmission of some of these viral contagions. And both you and I also have seen over the last several, because I know you and I are in practice about the same duration of time, and I know we have seen the overall denigration of just individuals' immune function, and that has been impacted by the obesity epidemic, the lack of exercise, the lack of proper nutrition. I know another thing that you may want to mention is the fact that RFK Jr. just flipped the food pyramid on its head, and people don't understand that either. So all of these things factor in, and I'm curious about your thoughts relative to the multiple variables that come into this equation as opposed to just the vaccines themselves.
I would like to expand on the one thing that you mentioned. I was waiting for it to come up, and I was certainly hoping, because you and I both are in this space very much, nutrition. Actually, there was a very good book that came out that basically the author states, in looking at all of these variables, it is actually nutrition that is the single greatest driver. And it makes sense, because when we look at what are the best treatments, in combating viruses. So the pox, it's what? Vitamin A. From COVID and the other influenza viruses, vitamin D. And of course, the other big one, good old Linus Pauling, and vitamin C. If people are just getting the good and proper amounts of those three vitamins alone, nothing else of most of these diseases would be put out, literally.
Yes.
Because that's the key. And so actually, when as being in this side of things, it's like, oh, well, I would say, yeah, the number one thing that came along that reduced infectious diseases was hand washing and personal sanitation, personal hygiene. Number two was community sanitation. And number three was being out there with, and really in prevention of death from these diseases, which viruses aren't really there, but is antibiotics, not vaccines.
Right.
And then of course, the one that got pushed to the front, which wasn't on my front burner until I started reading about it and doing my own research, is actually nutrition. And that makes perfect sense, because those are your three big vitamins. If people just get those on board, you've got yourself you are well on your way to living a healthy life from infectious diseases.
So true. And and I've spoken with you about this before. I started a group for our state association called the Functional Nutrition Working Group, which I hope your son and daughter-in-law will become a part of at some point. Looking forward to that.
I'll see. We sit down tomorrow.
Good. But, one of the things that one of our docs on the working group said was exactly what you said. If you can just get patients to realize how important, and you know as well as I that vitamin D would actually be called a hormone if it were discovered today. Get them to take some vitamin D, get them to take some vitamin C, just the basics. And I have there's a colleague in town here, a medical doctor, who started an organization in Honduras. And you, coming from a family of missionaries, you know how important it is to get out there and not only help them learn about what you do in your missions work, but also to help them learn about what they need to do for sanitation and hygiene and proper nutrition. And I had a conversation with her, and I talked to her about just can you get just a multiple vitamin that you could provide through the government of Honduras to all these people? And she said, yes, we're working on that right now. So to your point, these are all factors that really had more of an impact on overall health of individuals and longevity than the vaccines did. But the confusion comes in part because of something else that you mentioned earlier, and that was what happened in, I think it was 1980 or 81, when the pharmaceutical industry was no longer, was absolved of all legal responsibility for anything that occurred with these vaccines. And, then there's a reporting process through VEERS, which you can speak of a little bit more, where, you're supposed to be able to report a vaccine injury. But that doesn't really quell. And also, any payment for that is coming out of the taxpayers' pockets, not out of the pharmaceutical industry. And then if we combine that with the advertising that was allowed, as well as I, 40 years ago when both you and I started in practice, if a medical doctor advertised on TV, they'd be chastised and potentially brought before the board. So why don't you speak to those things? Because I'm sure you could go a little longer on that as well. Whoop, lost audio.
Me?
There you go.
So the thing with that was 1986. With
lost.
The
we're good now.
Okay. He gave the pharmaceutical industry a pass. And actually, it's interesting because the individual who actually brokered that was Anthony Fauci.
Wow.
And it was through him that they decided that they would absolve them. And the whole reason for that was because they were pushing the vaccine, and the pharmaceutical industry came to them and said, "Look, we're going to go bankrupt because we're seeing so many deaths. We're getting sued over the deaths and over the injuries from the vaccines. So we are going to go bankrupt over the suits." Well, doesn't that say something right off the bat? If they're having that many side effects and deaths and suits from it, then you have to wonder this whole thing with safety and efficacy to boot. So that was the whole thing, and that was with the act again in 1986. And then you fast forward now to how that comes along, and how now then, because of that, they just increased the number of vaccines. So, hey, we don't have anything, so let's just bring vaccine. Let's find the next gold mine and get it on the schedule. Once it's on the schedule, then it becomes instead of a requirement. So now then it's money. So let's push it then on all the kids, and let's push it down to all ages. Whenever there was not the incidence, and again, when these vaccines, so for example, the measles a decade before the vaccine ever hit the market was down to 1 in 10,000 deaths. And it's like, okay, so the incidence of death from measles was already at basically nil before and that was a decade before the vaccine ever hit the market. So we have to understand what's behind that. And again, it has to do with being absolved. And so then all bets off and everything just comes down the pike. And it's all about the money is really what it boils down to. And we can touch on that but that's really where it comes into play here, in my opinion. Now, I grew up with vaccines. I went, as you said, I was a missionary, MK, missionary kid. We got our vaccines to go to Peru. Yeah, we did get our tetanus. We did get our diphtheria. We did. But back then, when we went, I got a total of 10 vaccines. 10. Now then, when you look at the antigens and all the vaccines, and I didn't get it until my first vaccine wasn't until I was heading off to the mission field when I was 7 years old. That's another very important factor, is the age at which they are administered. Extremely important. And so, again, 10 vaccines after 7, is a whole different ball of wax when it comes to development for the child. And again, you have a lot less. I never got the MMR. I had already had MMR, and so with that, you didn't have those types of things, which you have now, where the kids are basically a pincushion. And I think it's up to now 90, if they get all the recommended vaccines, the antigens. And that's the other thing where they're playing games with this whole thing. And that is, how many vaccines or antigens does a kid get versus how many shots do they get? Because they're combining 5 and 6 at one visit. So it's like, well, they only got 2 shots. Well, but they got 6 or 8 antigens.
Right.
That's where, and it's the antigens that are the problem, because they're the proteins.
Right.
And so that's where you get into the situation. They kind of play, again, semantics over, well, the kids aren't getting that many shots. They're only getting 30 over a lifetime, or by the time they're 18. No, but they're getting,
multiples at one time, which in the environment, you never encounter. Your immune system would never encounter that load at one time ever. And, to your point, when we were kids, we got polio and smallpox, period. That was it. And, we got the rest of them. I had, like you just said, I had mumps, I had measles, we had all that, and we survived and thrived, actually, because I think, as you can acknowledge, the immune system is stronger as a result of having natural immunity. And this was a debate during COVID that we went through, natural immunity as opposed to the mRNA vaccine. Would you want to, and I think this is important for people because this is going to come up again now, maybe not so much now, but who knows what administration we're going to be involved with in the future. When we first came out with this emergency use of the mRNA vaccine, I would have many patients and many individuals in the community ask me if I was going to have the vaccine. And I never answered that question. I responded with another question. And my question to them was, do you know what mRNA is? And their response to a person, Gordon, was, no, I don't. And I then would say, would you like to know what that is? And I would sit down and literally draw out what mRNA does in your body and your cell and what happens when they inject it into your system. This has been experimental, as you know. It was never approved for use prior to this emergency use. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on that because, in the future, I think it's important, and one of the things that I feel strongly about, as do you, is education of our patients and communities. In the future, this could come up again with others, which invariably it will. And I believe most of the research, if I'm not mistaken, was done with this type of vaccine for cancer research with mRNA. But what were your thoughts, and what are your thoughts about this at this point?
Well, with the mRNA platform and Dr. Robert Malone, all you have to do is go out, look him up, as he was one of the developers of it. But the mRNA platform itself is significant in the sense that what it does is the mRNA goes into the cell in a simplistic way, goes into the cell, and takes over the DNA, plugs into the DNA, and then produces, in the case of COVID, spike protein. Spike protein is the problem protein that was the whole illness issue with COVID, was the spike protein. It was not the virus, it was not the coronavirus that was the big problem. Coronavirus is simply a cold virus, but it's what they put on it with the spike proteins that really were the problem. And so in the situation with the mRNA, it goes into the cells, hijack the cells then fabricate mRNA or fabricate spike protein and then kick it out into the system, to which the system is supposed to then form antibodies to what's being produced by the cells, and then, hey, we're immune. Well, it does not work that way, because we know that the spike protein is what causes, again, the as we call it, I call it a thrombo-inflammatory disease. That's basically what it is. Causes big problems with clotting and with inflammation. So now then you have somebody who is producing the spike protein, their factories don't shut down, which that was to be the intent was, okay, you just produce a few, it gets broken down by the body, and we're off and running. No, it does not. It incorporates, we could get into all kinds of things with that as to where it goes, but it goes essentially everywhere. Right. And so the big driving issues with it, of course, everybody's kind of familiar with the myocarditis, the heart inflammation, but it can hit, I have seen it hit any organ system in the body. Name it, I will tell you, I have patients that I'm dealing with or have dealt with where that's the case. And so including the big one, which is becoming a real big problem, is cardiac arrhythmias, the rhythm problems that are occurring. And people they just drop. And so that's a big problem with that. but to go to where you're at, again, I personally have my own patients who have been involved in the research where they are going to use the mRNA technology. They are looking to use the mRNA technology for flu shots. They're looking to do it. And then my patient did her PhD work using mRNA technology for the hepatitis virus. And so what they're going to do is they're going to methodically go down through and take each one of those vaccines and turn it into mRNA on an mRNA platform. Wow, that's just wreaks havoc. I mean, I can't even imagine, just from what we've seen with the COVID shot, how that's even going to come close. So the VAERS system and the V-Safe system. So you look at a pie graph, and I have these, and literally just from the mRNA vaccine, the number of deaths in the last 5 years is 1/2 of all the deaths, and that is all the deaths from the other combined vaccines from the inception of the VAERS system, which was back in 1980 something, or 1990 was when the VAERS system came in.
And that's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's just the reported data. There's much more than that that's unreported.
Right.
And that's the challenge. But, you know, to your point with the mRNA for other vaccines, there are two reasons that they want to do this, in my opinion. One is it's fast. They don't have to wait, years ago, you inject into an egg, you grow it, and you create the antigen. And number two is it's cheap. It's very inexpensive to do, as opposed to some of the other processes that you have to go through in order to create a vaccine. So, to your point earlier, Dr. Donaldson, it's about money. It's plain and simple. It's about money. And, this goes to the advertising point that you made earlier, too, about how, that switched. And now, we can advertise all these things on TV. And we've gotten to the point now where we have patients go into a doctor's office and tell the doctor what they need or want. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah.
You've seen that metamorphosis over the course of your career, I know.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because there are only 2 countries in the entire world where advertising is allowed: New Zealand and the United States. No other country allows advertising of any pharmaceutical product at all. So, even if we look at that side of things, and again with this whole vaccine situation, to kind of go where, and again, it's on the forefront with the MMR and autism, again, what RFK is saying, and this is where I really find it interesting. He is not saying get rid of all vaccines. He says, let's do the appropriate study on them to see if they are safe and effective. That's all we want. That's what we want to do. And so the problem is they're fighting that tooth and nail, because what they really know behind the scenes is they aren't.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line, because no vaccine has ever been studied against a placebo saline-based shot. They have only ever been studied against another vaccine. So it's kind of like, well, the side effect profile is not as bad, but, well, it's not as bad as the side effect profile from this, or it's not as bad as the side effect profile from this vaccine. So it's like, which vaccine has the worst side effect? Really, what it is in these studies.
Yes.
When you look at what it's put up against. And so that's really the problem. So what he's saying is, look, let's just have true, open, placebo-controlled studies with these vaccines and see if they're truly safe and effective.
And why would anyone not want to know the truth and the facts? That's what science is. We try to expose the truth and the facts. Some of those later on through other research will be altered or changed or refuted or whatever. But, we base things on the data and the facts. And unfortunately, we have people out there that are motivated by something other than facts and data. And it's a shame.
And that's just it with the whole, again, talking about that motivation factor with the how they operate on an ethical side of things. And as the whistleblowers come out, it has been replete with what happened. So I was just for this doing some quick research on that, and that is that the top four vaccine manufacturers, Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, and then Sanofi. So they're the top four. Just from 20 to 24, those four companies have paid out a total of 33 billion plus in fines because of bad manufacturing, because of problems, because the incompetencies in the production of the vaccines, but in 2023 alone, those three companies made over 205 billion.
Jeez.
So the fines just become a line item of doing business with these companies, and therein lies the problem. They aren't held to an account. Okay, you have these fines, and it's a problem. And with the adverse events that are coming out of your product, but they pay the fines and then just move on.
Yeah.
Because again, it's part of doing business with the whole with the whole vaccine industry. So it's a pharmaceutical industrial complex, and it just comes down to the dollars. That's very evident with what the latest is now, where the federal judge just allowed the suit against RFK to proceed on the side of his change as his recommendations, taking these vaccines off as recommendations. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason is very simple, because in doing that, now then the clinics, the hospitals, the pediatricians, or doctors, let me just say doctors, because as a family practitioner, I can give vaccines too.
Sure.
Because now then they don't get the bonuses from Medicare, Medicaid, and the insurance industry, and then pharma as well. So it's all about the money. So that's really why they're complaining, not because it was taken off of the recommended vaccine schedule, but simply because now then the bonus dollars go away that they are getting paid for that. And that's why these pediatricians are very militant about, if you aren't going to vaccinate your child, then we don't want you in our practice.
Yes.
Because of the bonus incentives that come out of that. On average, the average pediatrician who vaccinates at least 80% completely with their patient population, they can get a bonus of $100,000. And a clinic will get an additional, on average, $500,000 or $600,000. So that's when you have to then question, okay, what is the motive for giving the vaccines? It's not for the safety of the child. It's actually for the profit. Again, Dr. Paul Thomas, who has lost his license, who's fighting it at the Supreme Court level at this point in time, lost his license because he came out with a study with, I believe it was John Leake, who basically showed in his practice that kids who were vaccinated weren't as healthy as kids who were unvaccinated.
Right.
And so because of that, and he produced a study, he basically was forced to retract and he lost his license over it. So you really have to wonder, but let's think logically about just how things operate.
Exactly. And I think so many people are totally unaware of the incentivization of the vaccinations. It's almost, to me, it's unethical, that you would make money based on the fact that you're pumping this into children. And, my background, as you know, and you are aligned with that as well, is, we do everything we can to keep patients away from pharmaceuticals if possible. We acknowledge the fact that they're necessary at times, but we try to avoid them if we can. In my practice, and I'm sure in yours, the majority of patients who are octogenarians or beyond take few pharmaceutical medications. And, many of them have taken supplementation for years and years. So this has been a joy. This has been great. You are a wealth of knowledge, my friend, and I appreciate you very much. This is something that I think we need to do again because we can go into many different topics together. You have a practice out there in Morgantown, Morgantown Family Practice. Is there a way that people can get in contact with you if they want to?
Well, they can, and so here's my deal. Obviously, as you are well aware, and that is with my wellness practice and with doing that part of it, I have a lineup of patients who want to get in, and it's only me right now. I am, though, 2026, hopefully, we are I'm trying to become more efficient using technology. And,
good for you. Good for you.
And incorporating my physician's assistant as well, so that we can bring people in who really are interested in their health. Because I will say it, no question about it, the only way that people are going to live healthy is they're going to have to take it into their own hands, and they're going to have to find people to work with. I have a real quick one on that one. I had a fellow who called in from my son's practice because my son referred him to us because he's having issues from injury from the COVID shot.
Sure.
And so he called in because I have my protocol in doing that to help with that. And he goes, so I took your protocol to my doctor and asked him if he would work with me on these medicines and supplements, and he won't. And that's the problem. It's simply that we're trying to just get somebody better because he understands where the issue is at. And so again, hopefully in that situation, now he wants to come my way, and it's like, okay, let's try.
Where am I going to put him? Yeah, it's a good problem to have, and I think we both have it. But it's an opportunity for us to be able to help and help where there is no help conventionally. So carry on your wonderful work, my friend. We will meet again in this platform and have some other conversations about other topics regarding health and wellness.
Absolutely, and it's been my pleasure.
Mine as well, my friend. And thank you, everyone. I hope that you learned something new from what we had to present today. I think that this information is something that everyone should hear and know. And it's something that I hope that you'll spread to others. So if you like what you saw, share it, please, and press like, too. We always appreciate that. All right, thank you, Dr. Donaldson. Safe travels and have a wonderful day, my friend.
My pleasure.
Thank you.